Science and technology impact our everyday lives. We use it all the time, all over the place. It's so ingrained into our society that we often don't even notice it anymore. However, this hasn't always been the case. During the Victorian era, science was relatively new. It was exciting. Every advancement was a step forward. Every new treatise and theory was just a little closer to understanding the true nature of the world. This reflected itself in all of Victorian society, and that includes the literature world. Everyone was thinking about science, so much so that as this century turned and the world moved along, the ideas of science did as well. What was once fascination turned to disillusionment, excitement to isolationism, wonder to clinicality and conformity. The movement of modernism found science actually to be against what they saw as human. It hindered rather than helped. And what I will be doing is contrasting the differences between modernism and Victorian time periods and how they saw science interact with society and the individual, how it changed as time moved on, whether it caused community or caused isolation. Starting with what the Victorians saw of the time, Huxley's 1880 address, Science and Culture, can show us that excitement. Huxley talks about the need for science and education and the need for science in the world. He's giving a speech to help commensurate a new learning institution, a new university. He pushes back against, quote, pretensions of our modern humanists to the possession of the monopoly of culture. He's making a point that science has a place in culture and should be allowed into society. He's proud of science and scientific achievement, and this pride that Huxley believes in and embodies lives throughout the entirety of the Victorian era. For example, the Crystal Palace, or the Great Exhibition of 1851, shows this pride. It's a house made entirely of glass that was built just to prove that it's possible to be built. And then they took many scientific wonders and new developments and new inventions and shoved them inside, and people would pay to go visit, and the lines were so long. It was a massive attraction. It was a massive building. It was a celebration of science. And they just held so much pride in this achievement. And this building, Huxley's address, it all just emphasizes that they felt this need for science to be a part of their culture. However, as time marched on, that pride slowly turned to disillusionment and a feeling of failure. In hard times, Charles Dickens sets up this family that believes fully and only in science. It's headed by the father, who's a teacher at an institution nearby, a school. And this family finds that their following of science, their dedication to it, doesn't actually solve any of their problems. They still experience a lot of difficulties and hardships in their life with people around them and meeting and communicating and connecting with those people. And this is representative of what many Victorians were starting to discover near the end of the Victorian era, that science wasn't solving all of the problems they had. It was this disillusionment that was starting to run through. Dickens does provide a solution in his novel. The family turns to each other, they develop interpersonal connections, they develop their relationships more fully, they start to understand each other. It's the solution Dickens tries to suggest. It's a more humanist approach. It also was represented in Hardy, who in his poem The Convergence of the Twain, he speaks of, quote, human vanity, end quote, and, quote, the pride of life that planned her, in reference to specifically the Titanic and its sinking. It shows that the Crystal Palace was just a glass house. It was just a building with discovery in it. It's the start of disillusionment. this hubris, this vanity, this pride. And Hardy's ideas of science develops even further when the modernists start to take over. T.S. Eliot fully shows that in his poem The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. The language is clinical, it's cold, it discusses the night sky, something that's usually beautiful. Van Gogh painted impressionists of it. People love to talk about the night sky, but Eliot describes it as a patient, etherized upon a table. It's cold, it's clinical. He characterizes the yellow fog or smoke, probably industrial fog or some other thing, as a malignant entity. It moves evilly along the streets. It fills up window panes. It's choking and suffocating. It's not good. This characterization is demonstration of the disillusionment in science. It's not just failed them now. It's become an enemy. It rolls down the streets and it harms them. It's a danger. It isolates the main character. He wonders if he dares to disturb the universe. He can't relate with the people around him. He is so just clinical, so cold. This isolation also shows up in W.H. Auden's The More Loving One. The poem is short enough that I can actually read it aloud to show you, but here goes. Looking up at the stars, I know quite well that, for all they care, I can go to hell. But on earth indifference is the least we have to dread from man or beast. How should we like it were stars to burn with a passion for us we could not return? If equal affection cannot be, let the more loving one be me. Admirer as I think I am of stars that do not give a damn, I cannot, now I see them, say I missed one terribly all day. Were all stars to disappear or die, I should learn to look at an empty sky and feel its total dark sublime, though this might take me a little time. Here, Auden is demonstrating that the knowledge that the stars are nothing more than floating orbs of gas in the sky isolates him, because they don't care. They're incapable of caring. They're not alive. They're just floating orbs of gas. The scientific discovery removed that wonder from his world. It made it so that for him the stars don't care anymore. The tone of Auden's poem is sad. It conveys a loss. And it speaks of loss of the stars so that it seems like he is talking about an empty sky, but that loss could also be the loss of the wonder that the stars convey to him. Auden's and Eliot's poems overlap at some points with their themes. They're writing about science, they're writing about the discoveries and how industry and science is isolating, how it totally removes the idea of the world around them as being full of wonder. It's different than what the Victorians saw. The Victorians originally loved science. They made discovery after discovery, celebrating with large glass palaces and speeches, as I said earlier. However, the century drew on. The problems of the world remained unsolved. Great freeing of the soul was unachieved. The Victorians grew disillusioned. They didn't see science as an enemy per se, but merely a failed attempt. They turned back to humanity and to relationships. They still enjoyed science, they still built ships, but it wasn't the savior they were hoping. Then the Victorian age ended. The modernists took over. Wars broke out. Science advanced even farther, but not in the ways people would have thought. And they found that for them, science was an enemy. It isolated them. It removed wonder from the world. So they wrote against it. They wrote against that isolation, against explaining all the wonder away. They wrote in tones that were clinical and depressing to show that science and discovery is clinical and depressing. This continued through postmodernism, and it can even be seen today. There's the push against cell phones, the argument that the internet is just dividing everyone, it's isolating. There's the fear that technology will take away our privacy, take away our individuality, make us unable to truly connect. Sounds kind of modernist. You see, the modernist sentiment didn't end when modernism did. Victorian excitement about each big new discovery didn't end with the death of Queen Victoria. Everyone still got excited when we took a picture of the black hole. We built ships after the Titanic sank. We just made sure to look out more closely for icebergs. These large concepts, these changes over time, are important to track, for sure. But the eras we assign are nebulous, ever changing. The influence of large concepts, like how science and culture interact, and how those interactions affect authors, affect artists, it's constant. It doesn't obey the rules of clearly defined eras. Regardless, technology and the impact it's had on these writings is a very important concept to track. And I do hope you research into it on your own, read some of the poems I discussed here, look deeper into Victorian and modernist literature. Eliot, Auden, Hardy, they're all fantastic poets. I highly recommend all of their poetry. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day.